Hi, this is Lucy Malenke from the James Madison University Writing Center, and this is the first of a two-part video series about writing in an academic style. First things first, let's clarify what I mean when I say academic style. It's the formal writing style you use when you are writing for an audience of scholars or experts in a field. The word choices, sentence structures, organizational patterns, and tone of a paper all work in combination to create its style. There are many different kinds of assignments and writing tasks that require you to use an academic style, including most research papers, literature reviews, empirical studies, case reports, critical analyses, and theory papers. However, you should be aware that every discipline or field of study has its own particular stylistic features. Today, we're going to focus on some common features in scientific and research-based writing, but it's always a good idea to talk to your professors about the conventions that characterize academic writing in your discipline. This video covers three important style considerations: point of view, active versus passive voice, and information flow. In addition to the publication manual of the American Psychological Association, I'll be drawing from John Swales and Christine Feek's book, Academic Writing for Graduate Students. This book is a great resource, not just for graduate students, but for anyone engaged in academic writing. Let's start by talking about point of view, which is the way authors position themselves in relationship to the topics they discuss and in relationship to their audiences. We'll begin with authors' relationships to their topics. Traditionally, in research and science writing, when authors are describing their original studies or ideas, they refer to themselves in third person as the authors or the researchers. They may even say this paper or this study to avoid self-reference. However, sometimes this point of view can create confusion for readers. For example, it may not be clear whether the term the authors refers to the authors of the current paper or the authors of outside sources that have been incorporated into the paper. The American Psychological Association actually recommends using the first person I or we to help distinguish the writer or writers of the paper from authors of outside sources. But different professors, disciplines, and even academic journals have their own preferences, so make sure to ask about the preferred point of view whenever you receive a writing assignment. Writers' choices regarding point of view also influence the way they address their readers. In most fields, using third person is the preferred way to address the audience. For example, if you're writing to an audience of nurses, you might say, "Scholars and practitioners in the field of nursing should be aware of this important distinction." Addressing the audience by saying, "You should be aware of this important distinction," would sound too direct, and using the first person, "We should be aware of this important distinction," might create confusion about who we represents. According to APA style guidelines, the authors of a paper should only use the first person we to refer to themselves, not to a broader group or to the general population. Another style choice that academic writers must consider is when to use active or passive voice. You may have heard at some point, maybe from an English teacher, never to use passive voice. This is probably because active voice is known for being clearer, more concise, and more engaging than passive voice. Or perhaps your biology instructor told you to always use passive voice when writing your lab reports. This is likely because descriptions of scientific procedures generally avoid self-reference. But as Swales and Feek point out in their book, both active and passive voice are used in academic writing. The key is to choose the right voice for the right purpose. Active and passive voice can be used to convey the same information, but each has a different emphasis. In active voice, the focus is on the actor, the person or thing performing the action. So in the sentence, "The nurse vaccinated the patient," the actor, in this case the nurse, is the subject of the sentence. That subject performs the action, vaccinating, on the recipient of the action, the patient. Passive voice, on the other hand, emphasizes the recipient. In this sentence, the patient was vaccinated by the nurse. The recipient is the subject. And as in all passive constructions, the subject is being acted upon rather than performing the action. So in this case, the patient is passively receiving the vaccination from the nurse. It's possible, when using passive voice, to eliminate the actor entirely. You could simply say, the patient was vaccinated, and in some cases, that might be sufficient. So how do you decide between passive and active voice? The APA manual says that active voice is preferable to passive voice in most situations. Active voice allows for vigorous and direct communication. And when discussing research involving humans, active voice signals respect for study participants, showing their choice to act rather than representing them as mere subjects being acted upon. Finally, active voice helps avoid a grammatical problem that commonly results from using passive voice: dangling modifiers. In the case of the passive sentence, the participants were tested using this procedure. It's unclear who was using the procedure. The active version of the sentence, using this procedure, I tested the participants, solves this problem. But the APA manual also points out situations in which passive voice is appropriate. For instance, in the methods section of an empirical study. Here, the emphasis should be on the procedures, not the researchers performing those procedures. Additionally, there are cases where the recipient of an action is more important than the actor, and in these cases, passive voice is a helpful tool. Finally, variety in sentence structure helps the flow of a paper, so rigidly sticking to either passive or active voice could result in choppiness. Swales and Feek suggest that academic writers use a combination of active and passive voice. By using the information in this video, you can do that in a purposeful way. According to the APA manual, readers will better understand your ideas if you aim for continuity in words, concepts, and thematic development from the opening statement to the conclusion. In whatever paper you're writing, it should always be clear how each idea connects to the one before it and the one after it, and how each paragraph or section connects to the one before it and the one after it. The APA manual suggests using the full range of punctuation marks to help readers understand relationships between ideas. Let's take a look at the example sentence here. The data helped us identify 3 key needs: the need for clearer ethical guidelines, the need for more ethics training, and the need for a system for reporting ethics violations. In this sentence, the colon tells us that we are going to get a list of the 3 needs mentioned in the introductory clause, and the commas help separate each item in the list. Another way to indicate the relationships between ideas is to use transition words. The APA manual provides these examples of words that can be used to link ideas in time, to illustrate cause and effect, to add or elaborate on existing ideas, and to show contrast. Swales and Feek, in Academic Writing for Graduate Students, introduce another technique for establishing a smooth flow of ideas. They recommend placing old information that the reader is already familiar with at the beginning of a sentence, and introducing new information later in the sentence. There are 3 different ways to do this. The first way is to repeat information from the beginning of the first sentence at the beginning of the second sentence. Let's look at this example. Research has shown that caffeine does indeed reduce sleepiness and can lead to better academic performance since students can spend more time studying. Despite its effectiveness in counteracting sleepiness, caffeine can have a negative impact on subsequent sleep. We see here, in the second sentence, that the old idea that caffeine reduces sleepiness is mentioned before introducing the new idea of caffeine's negative impact on sleep. The next way to establish old to new information flow is to repeat information from the end of the first sentence at the beginning of the second sentence. As you can see in this example, the term functional energy drinks, which occurs at the end of the first sentence, appears as an acronym, FEDs, at the beginning of the second sentence, providing continuity. The final option is to use the term this or these plus a noun to refer to some or all of the preceding sentence. Let's look at this example. In addition to containing caffeine, FEDs have other active ingredients, such as taurine, glucose, and glucuronolactone. Exactly how these ingredients together affect alertness remains unclear. The long list of ingredients in the first sentence is referred to as these ingredients at the beginning of the next sentence, and then connected to the new idea of uncertainty about how they function together. As you can see, this old to new technique is especially helpful when discussing highly technical information. I hope you feel more equipped to make decisions about point of view and passive versus active voice, and to manage the information flow in your writing. And remember that if you're struggling with any of these style issues, the tutors at the University Writing Center would love to help you. You can also visit our website and explore additional online resources for transitions, sentence structure, and other style issues. Good luck with your academic writing projects.